Good morning, y'all. This is P139 Girl coming today to give you a little encouraging word. I know that sometimes you may feel yourself locked away and hidden beneath all of the self-doubt and fears. Who doesn't? You've been affirmed and told that you are somebody and that you are somebody that God has made you to be, but for some reason you still have those hidden lies trying to invade your mind. Thoughts like, am I good enough? Will they accept me? Can I take another step? How will I do this? Or what about what they said? Or I will always be like my mother or like my father, or I'm limited to where I come from. All of these questions put me in the remembrance of this guy named Gideon in the Bible. He had all of those same questions too. One day he's in the wine press just hiding away in his little fears, and God comes and he speaks to Gideon. In chapter 6, verse 12. I'm going to read this out of the Passion Translation. It says it like this. It says, Yahweh's angel suddenly appeared to Gideon and said, Yahweh's presence goes with you, man of fearless courage. I can imagine Gideon in this moment because just like so many of us, God has spoken to us. He has told us that we are someone. He has defined who we are, and we're looking at him like, do you know who you're talking to? But Gideon does just that. He begins to question God's position as being God and what God says about Gideon. So then God does what he so faithfully does because he's God and he's full of grace and love, and he so desperately wants us to know who we are. And it says in verse 13, it says, then Yahweh himself, see, at first he sent his angel's presence or his presence to go with him, but now he's like, okay, Gideon, I'm going to get in your face because I've told you who you are, but I need you to see it directly from me. So it says that Yahweh himself faced Gideon directly and said, hey, am I not sending you? And with my presence, you have all you need. So go in strength that you now have and rescue Israel from the Midianite powers. You see, in this moment, God was speaking to every lie that Gideon had told himself. God was affirming Gideon face to face, and he was telling Gideon, I'm with you, but you still have to go. I've already given you the necessary tools. Now you just need to believe that you can do it and know that you can do it because I am with you. God is speaking to every single fear and doubt inside and every place of insecurity and insufficiency and telling him you are more than enough because I am more than enough, and I make you more than enough because I am with you. But then Gideon still, he can't help himself, and he's stuck in his little head. And he's thinking to himself about where he comes from, what his biology is, what he's limited to because of this. And Gideon questions God, and he says to him, don't you know where I come from? Don't you know that my family is the least of all the other families, and that in my family being the least of all the other families, I'm the least of them? Have you ever thought like that? Here Gideon is telling God who Gideon is and how Gideon sees himself. But I love what God does in this moment because he keeps contending with Gideon and taking his mind off of who he is separate from God. And he refocuses Gideon's mind to who he is with God. God says to Gideon in verse 16, he says, my presence and my power will be with you. Believe, Gideon. Believe that because I am with you, you will crush these Midianites as easily as if they were only one man. I think God is trying to show Gideon that there is a distinction between who is God's and who is not. He's trying to show Gideon that these Midianites, they are just mere human, mere men. But Gideon is as God is, and as such, anything that contends with him is contending with God. And because they contend with God, they are crushed. It's like God is completely ignoring who Gideon is in the natural. He's completely ignoring everything that Gideon is trying to tell him. And God is elevating his mind to not focus on the biological makeup of his DNA, but to recognize and watch, because God makes himself one with Gideon in verse 34. Watch. It says it in the Passion Translation that the Spirit of Yahweh clothed himself in Gideon and enveloped him. This enveloping was God bringing Gideon back to who he already was all along. He was never less than. He was never defeated. He was never as his biology said he was. God's spirit had to come back and dress himself in Gideon to bring him back to remembrance that he is a champion. He always was a champion. And as such, he has no foe that can defeat him because he is one with the Almighty God. He is as God is in this earth, and as such, no army can defeat him. Can you believe today that this is your same portion of truth? I call you out as a warrior, and I declare that you are a champion of God. You were never the least of your family, and your family was never the least of them all, because you have always been a son of God, and as such, you are a warrior. Nothing but the best comes from God and Abba. He is the best. He is the greatest, and today is your remembrance ceremony. God, the Lord of Heaven's army, he rules everything. He reigns, and that God has enveloped himself in you, and his DNA is reminding you today of his constant presence. He goes with you everywhere you go and makes you a force to be reckoned with. Reign today in all that you do. You are a mighty warrior, a champion. You conquer your environment and everything in your atmosphere and cause it to be subject to the kingdom within you.